We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Monday edition of Free Association Radio. This is 11th House. I'm Robert Phoenix. How is everybody today? I'm doing okay. I'm not great. I have a weird kind of infection, blockage, stoppage in my left ear, and yes, I fully understand the symbolism. It's the left side. It's the feminine. I'm not listening, apparently, trying to get my attention. So I'll be communicating to you from through today's show in mono, not stereo. Unfortunately, I've only got one speaker. It's available to me. It's my right ear. So anyway, how is everybody? Welcome to the week. It's another week on planet Earth, and things are heating up in a big kind of way. If you have not noticed it, there is all hell breaking loose in Israel / Palestine / Gaza. We're going to cover that in today's show. We're going to look at Israel's chart and the crisis and the dilemma of that chart, which is clear to any astrologer. And I will boldly dare to go where no astrologer dares to go, which is a critical look as to what's happening and taking place there. It is the time for this country to be exposed to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world will see exactly what's going on in a very visceral kind of way. It's already happening, and it's going to dovetail a little bit about what we're going to be talking about as well, which is the midheaven, the MC, or the 10th house, which is the house associated with the midheaven. So we're going to get into that in today's show. We're going to do some free readings. That'll be in hour number 2, which is what we normally do. I have a new post up on the website. It's about the supermoon, and I've had a few interesting responses about the supermoon, some of which have been slightly contrarian. In fact, the contrarian theme is a pretty interesting theme in my life right now. I'm getting a lot of contrary energy. So again, I'm trying to look at, well, what do I need to do with all this contrary energy? I had somebody come in from out of town this last week, and in fact, he was a guest on my show on Friday. And it was a unique experience, connecting with somebody that you don't have a lot of contact with. Some scattered Facebook, the occasional phone call. But I haven't seen him I've seen Richard in about 3 years, almost. 2 years, since I left California. So he was traveling across country. And very interesting. Travel and place and astrology are kind of an amazing thing. It is this series of dynamics in collision. You are relocated or transposed to a new place, and then you have the chart of that place kind of taking over in some ways, your interface. It's certainly your local interface versus what you were before from a different place that you just departed from. And then, of course, there's the other person's chart and their own relocated reality that they are going through. And so you have this interesting kind of interface in time and space between two different people in two separate places, two separate charts. Are you the same? Are you different? Where does it meet? Where doesn't it meet? And so I actually experienced some of that over the course of this last weekend. And part of it has to do with the fact that in California, I am a Leo rising, which means that Uranus in a Leo sits on my ascendant there. So I had a very different history in California, and it was kind of crazy, actually. Something you would expect of someone who has Uranus on the ascendant in an area like California, which is a Uranian. Even though California, I believe, is ruled by Virgo, it is a really Uranian kind of place. Because look at Silicon Valley technology, that's all Aquarian, Uranian, software interface, people, ideas. So there's that part of it, which is Uranian. And then we go back to the Summer of Love, 1967, the heart of the revolution, or the new American Revolution, was the Bay Area, places like San Francisco, and certainly Berkeley, which was very political during that time. Again, a Uranian explosion of rebellion and dissent, taking on the man. So California itself has its own Uranian sort of personality, and that's where I grew up. Here in Texas, it's very different. I am a Virgo rising, God help us, with Pluto on my ascendant, just on the other side of the ascendant, just on the other side. It's a few degrees off in the 12th house. Now, I think I might have covered this when we got into the first house and the ascendant, but where a planet is placed in relationship to the ascendant is really important. So if you're listening to the show and you take notes so that you can learn how to read charts better, write this one down. It's important because a planet coming out of the 12th house onto the ascendant is an energy that is about emerging. And it is in some ways caught between the shadow world of the 12th house and the light of the morning, of the astrological morning of the first house, or the ascendant. Now, when we look at Aries on the ascendant, generally speaking, we're looking at the start of the day between 5 to 7 a.m., depending upon where you're born. Most times, you're going to get Aries on the ascendant. That's the way it is. Aries starts the day. Aries starts the astrological new year. So we have the light of dawn, or the light of the spirit, breaking through the prismatic expression of the chart. When a planet is on the other side and coming out of the darkness and onto the dawn of the chart, or the daybreak of the chart, it is part of a process that is almost in some ways liminal. That period between nighttime and daytime and daytime and nighttime. So the energy is one that is in formation, that it is coalescing, that it is catalyzing. It has not crossed the ascendant. The light of the day is not shining down upon that planet where you can see it and the rest of the world can see it. Contrary, and again, this is within about a 5-degree orb of the ascendant, that planet is coming out of a chrysalis state, and it is not fully formed. The energy is not fully formed. So there's always a sense of emerging. There's always a sense of trying to make a transition from one state to another. In my case, it might be literal. In other cases, it might be figurative. So this is an important thing to understand and know. You put that planet on the other side of the first house, the ascendant, it's in the first house. You get the energy. You ride the energy. It's there. It's palpable. People can sense it. People can feel it. They understand it to some extent. They may not always like it. They may not always appreciate it, but it's there for people to be able to touch. Coming from the 12th, it's not easy. It's not as easy. There's a sense, and I believe in some instances a disruptive sense as to how the individual can be viewed. It's a very catalytic energy because, as we know, the ascendant is, no matter what sign it's in, it's a cardinal point. So you can be a Virgo ascendant, which is mutable, but the ascendant itself, the descendant, the IC, the MC, they're all cardinal points of the chart. So that energy coming out of the 12th house is going to be catalytic, but as it relates to people in the general vicinity, they are not always sure what to expect or how it's going to impact them depending upon the planet. Let's use a few examples. And I know we were going to talk about the midheaven, but so let's say, for instance, Venus is 5 degrees off of the ascendant, and it's coming out of the 12th house. There is a general sense that the individual aspires towards creating relationship, and that their actions and their thoughts and their feelings and their words are all pointed towards relationship, towards connecting. Now, because Venus, and it doesn't matter what sign it's in, we're just looking at the planet, is within that 5-degree orb, people will sense this, but they may not be able to assess to what end that individual wants to create a relationship with. There will be some question, there will be some doubt, there will be at times a misplaced projection upon the individual. And now we're getting into 12th house material, because the 12th house material also is about people's own unconscious desires, motivations, feelings, whatever they are that have not been fully worked out, that then they project onto the other person. So here we have 12th house in collision. And so with Venus on the ascendant, people that are outside of that person would ask themselves, on some level, this person wants something from me. They want to have some kind of connection with me, whether it's stated or unstated, and I am not clear. So then the person who has Venus close to the ascendant, they have to work harder. They have to bridge the gap between that emerging energy coming out of the darkness of the 12th house, hitting the dawn of the ascendant, and then stating or being more explicit about who they are and what their needs are. So in this case, it would be something along the lines of making sure that the interaction between two people is defined. For instance, if you're a woman and you have Venus in the 12th house within a 5-degree orb of the ascendant, it would be incumbent, if you're in a relationship, to share that with a person that you're connecting with or having some form of meaningful conversation or meaningful connection. Because what happens then is that there is a common ground that's been established, that the person knows, oh, this person has a relationship already in their life. They're not coming on to me. They're not trying to get something from me that I may or may not be comfortable with, or it could be clearly stating that you're not interested, and the other person feeling that Venus and feeling the sense that you want to have this connection, which is undefined, may misinterpret that and take that as a sign that there is something to be pursued, there is a connection, and therefore they will come in and they will try to flesh that out and be the gap and bridge the gap between Venus and the ascendant. So it's important to be able to take that energy within that 5-degree orb and bring it across the line. And as Peter Gabriel says in one of his songs, what is it? I don't remember. It's a great song. And he says, make your intentions clear. And that's what you do with that configuration. So for me here in Austin, I have Pluto 4 degrees away from my ascendant. So very intense energy. It's not, it's not easy living with Pluto on the ascendant. So I went from living with happy-go-lucky Uranus to, hey, every day is life and death, and you're going to have, very powerful and profound interactions with people on a day-to-day basis, which is going to transform you. And sometimes it's mind-blowingly profound, and you get to get over your fears and all that other stuff. And other times it's like, holy shit, I am being melted down. So it's up to me to be able to somehow figure this Pluto thing out on my ascendant. Now, when I was in Boulder, Colorado, I had Pluto exactly on my ascendant. So when I was doing the shows for Gaiam TV, you were getting a full blast of Pluto if you watch those shows. That was Pluto manifested in every single one of those 23 episodes. So here I have to bridge the gap. I have to make that effort. And with Pluto, it's not that easy, let me tell you. So this relates to how I was perceived in California and how I'm perceived here in Austin, Texas by somebody who knew me in California. So here I have basically changed my life to be with my son. In California, I lived in really interesting, unusual kinds of far out places where my son lives here in Austin. He lives in a small McMansion out on the edge of Austin, kind of near the country, although that's expanding, but it's very conservative. There's no kind of hippy-dippy, trippy places close to where he lives. And so I've taken on a more conservative place for my dwelling. I live in an apartment. I live in a 3-bedroom apartment that has a community center and a pool. It's kind of a very kind of Virgo thing to do in some ways, going from living in a warehouse to living in an apartment. But it's not because I wouldn't want a cool place. It's because I had to be practical. Because that's what Virgo does. It's practical. Yeah, sure, I could live, 15, 20 miles away on the east side of town and, have a real kind of bohemian existence, but getting around Austin traffic and going to the baseball field where my kid plays, it's not practical, but it's not a Virgo thing to do. So what happens is that when we move and somebody else comes into our space from another place and has their own relocated version of who they are, it's like you're dealing from the tableau of memory that you have with another person. But then it gets condensed, it gets mixed, it gets synthesized and fused into some other kind of connection and relationship. And so you're operating on a number of different levels. You're operating, or they are, or you are operating on the level of memory. And then you're operating on the level of transition. And then you're operating on the level of transformation. And unless two people can spend a considerable amount of time together in one place, it's very hard to get to that transformational point. Because now what you have is you have a series of interactions that are based on transition, that are based on some other dialogue connected to both relocated charts. So I experienced that, and it is very unusual, very strange, to be honest with you. Anyway, that's just the start of today's show. We wanted to kind of get into that a little bit. We riff, right? Riff a while. I saw, speaking of the skies, I saw a really interesting object on Saturday night. We were up at the pool by the community center using the grill and making very nice barbecue chicken, I will say. And life is so weird. Life is strange. Like, there were people up at the pool, and they were playing, beer pong and cups and all these drinking games, and very unlike anything that you would see in some ways, Northern California, Berkeley, where I lived. Very, it's kind of a Yahoo sort of, blue collar, quote unquote, lower middle class thing to do if you wanted to look at it that way. I didn't look at it that way at all. Because why? Because that's their thing. That's what they're here to do. That's their thing. I don't have any judgment around it. As long as they don't get batshit crazy, start swearing, or doing things in front of my kid that I would find offensive, I don't have a problem with what they're going to do or what they did. And I tell you right now, that's not the case with everybody, especially if you're coming in from another part of the universe and bringing your ideas and your POV and your displacement into a new environment. You're going to be very judgmental about it. So I'm out hanging out. I'm not part of their thing, but I'm sharing the space with them. And I went back to the apartment to get some ice cream because I grilled some peaches on the grill. And unless you've had a grilled peach, and a peach from Texas, by the way, they're amazing. A grilled peach with ice cream is something that is almost quasi-religious. So I go back to the apartment to get the ice cream because it's cold. And as I'm walking down the driveway, all of a sudden I see this object just shoot across the sky. I've seen UFOs, I've seen meteors, and this was definitely not a meteor, although that's what's being reported, because they have no other frame of reference for this thing. Clear, straight line. Most meteors, they don't follow the horizon. And they don't follow the horizon from Florida to Texas. They don't do that. They generally come in straight down or at an angle. And this was not that. And it was trucking. And then it went and split off into 2 points of light, and then they both disappeared. And as I'm walking down the driveway, I hear one of the beer pongers yell, UFO, UFO. Of course, that was my first thought. But it's you could go online, you can check this thing out, and it looks like it could have been a meteor. But the challenge with this is it went right underneath a number of commercial airliners. Something about it is not quite right, and it doesn't feel like a straight meteor to me. So anyway, we saw that here on Saturday night in Texas. All right, let's get into the stars. The stars. Let us find the stars for this week. Where shall we go? Let us go to astro.com. By the way, I saw Gravity the other night. I don't understand the hype. I don't get it. I understand the symbolism. I don't understand the hype. Not getting it. All right. We are running out of Jupiter and Cancer. The clock is ticking. The final degrees are going bye, bye, bye. And I have liked Jupiter and Cancer. It's been very kind to me, except the last few degrees. But it's been kind to me. And au revoir, thank you, God. Thank you, Father, Mother, God. Thank you, Cosmos. Thank you, Universe, for Jupiter and Cancer. Now moving towards Leo. And we talked a little bit about that last week. I have some more thoughts about Jupiter and Leo. And they're controversial thoughts. They're controversial thoughts. Maybe I'll share them later. Of course it'd be controversial. Seems like anything I say now is controversial. People want to take me on about it. I've got Mars on my Venus, transiting Mars on my natal Venus. So I'm getting static feedback. Sun is at 22 Cancer, and we are getting close to the Sun opposing Michelle Obama's son. She was born on the 17th of January, making her, I believe, a 27-degree Capricorn. So she's going to have a Sun-Sun opposition. Haven't seen Michelle much lately, have we? No, we haven't. Ever since Ms. Joan Rivers said what she said on the internets. Of course, it's been framed that she's just making a joke about all the internet theories. But I'll tell you right now, Joan Rivers has Mercury in Gemini at 29 degrees, Venus in Gemini at 29 degrees. Both of them are in her third house, and she has Moon in Sagittarius in the ninth, almost on her midheaven. She may be doing something other than just making a joke. But of course, at the 29th degree with those planets in Gemini, it would appear that way to some people. So the Sun is at 22 Cancer, the Moon is at 24 Aquarius. It's a good day to not take things personally. It's a good day to practice a little bit of enlightened detachment, which is what the Moon in Aquarius can bring us. Oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that quirky? Isn't that eccentric? Isn't that odd? How unusual. Yes, even though it may be about me or you or one of my best friends, we could just step back and say, isn't that unusual? Isn't that unusual behavior? Let's practice some detached tolerance around it. Mercury is in Cancer, 1 degree. It is finally cycled out of Gemini. Finally, Mercury in Cancer is caring, loving, nurturing, has social memory, has genetic memory. Cancer is always about looking back. Capricorn is about looking forward. So as Mercury cycles through Gemini, we are going to go through a phase and a period of looking back, both as a nation, as a planet, as a people. It is a time for that kind of reflection. And it's also about a time of reflection where we are reflecting upon our experience with the world and whether or not we want to continue to have an experience with the world in the way that which we've been having it. The 0/1 degree of Mercury in Cancer, or Cancer in general, for the Sabian symbols is, and I'm paraphrasing here, one flag is lowered while another flag is raised. So there's an indication here of, even though Cancer is a cardinal sign, there is an indication of mutability and change. Flex and Mutability, one of my favorite records by Jackie Liebezeit and David Sylvian. By the way, the great bass player Charlie Hayden left us, passed away. He was amazing. He was, if you go back and listen to the mind-blowing recordings of Ornette Coleman and his theory of composition, harmolodics, Charlie Hayden is a main contributor to Coleman's ideas around avant-garde jazz and free jazz. Coleman took everything to its limits in terms of how a quartet could play together and not play together at the same time. And Charlie Hayden went on from Ornette Coleman's first quartet, along with Don Cherry and Ed Blackwell, to wind up becoming a very influential bass player on a lot of recordings on the ECM label. He was a great, great bassist, so rest in peace, Mr. Charlie Hayden. See, I'm doing it already. I'm looking backwards. I'm reflecting. Mercury in Cancer, going back in time. Anyway, the new flag thing. There's a new flag coming. There's a new flag coming, people. The old one is falling away. It's a maritime symbol is what it is. Venus is at Gemini 25. Remember, Joan Rivers has Venus at 29 Gemini, so she's going to have a Venus-Venus conjunction coming up here in the next couple of days. It should be interesting. Will it be earth shaking? No, probably not. But it'll be interesting just to keep your eye on it, see what happens with Miss talking out of both sides of the mouth, Joan Rivers. Mars, 24 Libra, getting ready to move into Scorpio. I can't wait. It'll be in my 12th house. Can't wait for that. Oh boy. In Scorpio. I'm already exhausted. Jupiter, 29 Cancer. Right there. Anoretic degree. Anoretic. I'm going to have a novel. One of my characters is going to be named Anoretic. I can spell her name Reddick. Anoretic. She'll be a character who can't make up her mind. She's always making plans and then changing them at the last moment. Jupiter and Leo is coming. One of the things that we're going to see with Jupiter and Leo, and here comes the controversial part, is that we are going to witness this whole notion and idea of children and love. And I'm saying love in a way that is not necessarily loving. Because what does Jupiter do? It expands. What is Leo? Leo is the sign of children. It's also the sign of love, expanding love in children. What do you get? You get the reprogramming of what it is that children are capable of and what is acceptable with them. So the whole gay marriage agenda, I'm sorry, it's an agenda. I guess life is an agenda. We all have agendas. So why would you say everything is an agenda? That way, nobody feels like they're getting screwed. Okay. The fight for gay marriage, the gay agenda, whatever you want to call it, that's over, done with, done. It's done. It's done. There's no turning back. These laws are on the books, and if you try to do anything other than the law that's been put on the books, you'll basically have your ruling overturned by a higher court, and the law will go back to the Supreme Court's decision, which is the law of the land. So it's over and done with. The next, I don't want to say battleground because that'd be too pointed, wouldn't it? The next realm where these ideas and opinions and social movements are going to be worked out, it's going to be around children and their right to love who they want, and the rights of others to love them in a way that we in the past have considered socially unacceptable. I got a really powerful email from Ellis Taylor this morning, and Ellis talked about this video that he had found on YouTube by a band called The Hollies, and the presenter, of course, was Jimmy Savile from Top of the Pops, and Jimmy Savile is one of the most despicable humans in modern history that we know of, because of all of the illicit sex that he had with kids and corpses, and maybe kids that were corpses. That's who that guy was, and he was knighted. And what's happening is that with Saturn and Scorpio, we're seeing more and more of this vile behavior being uncovered. Talked about it before. What's going to happen with Jupiter and Leo is that the people who have been undergoing this revelation, this dark revelation, they are going to try very strenuously to change the conversation from it being something that is immoral and dangerous to children to something that is natural and that children actually enjoy. So you trust here we go. Going on. I know I'm not supposed to predict things, but I'm predicting something, that we're going to start to see studies come out about how children orgasm much earlier than adolescents, and that these orgasms are important for children. They're personal. We can't take them away. It's their right. Fill in the blanks, because the studies are going to come The paid studies are going to come, the hard science, to tell us all that kids want sex at an earlier age, and that as adults, we don't have the right to say, no, we don't have the right to impose our own morality upon them, because this would be a violation of their natural feelings. And why would we ever want to do that? Well, really what it is it will be the legitimization of the people that are being confronted and outed during the Saturn and Scorpio cycle to have their cake and eat it too. Changing the dialogue, changing the ideas, changing the conversation, changing the science, changing the laws. That's where it goes. That's how it happens. You mark my words, we're going to see this with Jupiter and Leo, because it is the next phase. It is the next phase of turning everything upside down on the planet. Everything. I have a friend over on Facebook. I actually really respect him. His name is Paul Moreland. I'm not sure. I don't think Paul's listening to the show right now because he's busy. He's got his own show. I think Paul is a very astute observer of culture and culture within the African American community and esoteric culture. Paul knows his shit. And he posted something on his page about the march towards transgenderism. And it was a picture of a white male who is now a white woman. And Paul made a reference to Aleister Crowley and how the trinary species was something that Crowley actually was championing. So we're talking the hermaphrodite. And there is this assumption here that because Crowley was Caucasian, and this is magic, the occult magic that in some ways has been used against the people of the world, that this is something that people needed to be aware of. And I this is all Venus and Gemini stuff. I posted back, and again, I respect Paul a lot. I posted back on his Facebook page, and I said, well, this is, you're talking about Baphomet. Baphomet is prime deity of Freemasonry. And Freemasonry has a white branch and also has a black or African American branch. Prince Hall Masons, Boule. So we cannot separate out this worship towards this trinary deity, the hermaphrodite, which is the resolution of duality and the male and the female of the species, which is really what that's about, right? And I said we can't parse it out and say this is a white thing or a black thing, or because there are groups that support this, and they don't recognize color in that way, right? Because they're all part of the same lineage. So, I said, hey, look, if we want to deal with this stuff, we've got to put our predispositions aside, and we have to have a third column where we're agreeing on things. And I think for me personally, I think it's important. It's the one thing that gets us out of the binary trap of quote unquote racism. And I've been told there is no such thing as race, by the way. And we don't use the word race. Use ethnic groups. It's very important to understand that. Remember that. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up because it's a Venus and Gemini kind of moment in time. I had it on Facebook. Saturn at 16 Scorpio. It's retrograde, and right now Saturn is doing some major juju. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to use it in this phrase here, or in this context. I meant to say juju in terms of magic on Israel's chart. Tricky. Words are tricky, aren't they? We're going to look at that later. Uranus square Saturn. Oh, my God. That's a difficult energy. And we're all feeling that right now. Uranus-Saturn square. Damn. You know what that's about, right? Uranus wants the new, Saturn wants the old. Saturn wants the tried and true, the disciplined, the ordered. Uranus is like out with all of it. Boom. get rid of it. And I've been having the Saturn-Uranus square in my chart for a while. Not fun, let me tell you. And I'm going to have it again as Saturn gets closer and closer to square my own natal Uranus up in the 9th house. It's exhausting. I've had a Saturn-Uranus square and Uranus-Saturn square over the past year. It's the grind, the cosmic grind. So a lot of people feel restless. There's a restlessness. There's a sense that they need to change. A lot of people have this feeling they need to change. They don't know how to change. They don't know what to change. But no, God damn it, they know that they need to change. That's in the air. Do you break off and do something new, or do you stay with the tried and true? Because sometimes breaking off and doing something new isn't necessary. New isn't always the best thing. Can be. It's not always the best thing. Sometimes you need to stick around and finish what you started. That's very Saturn. Where sometimes you say enough is enough. We've done this. It's time to move on. And we're all kind of going through that phase and cycle with the square of both planets. Neptune is at 7 degrees retrograde Pisces. Well, what does retrograde do? Retro reveals. And what's revelatory about Neptune? Well, for instance, water's being stolen out of Lake Michigan. That's revelatory, don't you think? And we're dealing with Nestle and water rights. And I talked about this on Friday's show. We have a real problem here. And this is a big problem. I'm sorry to frame it as a problem, just in case you have your own ideology that there are no problems. It's a problem. Maybe we can call it a challenge. Let's put a bow on it and call it a challenge. And there are California is under a massive drought. There are other parts of this country that are in drought conditions, and the reward for that, in terms of people that want to manage water, is that they get to sell water to parts of the country that don't have it. It's like what Enron did with energy. We're looking at the Enron of water, thanks to people like T. Boone Pickens, who've been snapping up all of these aquifers. And T. Boone, by the way, wants to snap up those aquifers because he can frack on those lands too. So it's not just about taking water and selling it. It's about using the water to frack and get gas. And by the way, I think gas and oil is everywhere. It's all over the place. It's not just in specific areas like West Texas or Pennsylvania. It's everywhere. We've been led to believe that it's only in certain very, and the challenge is that what depth does it take to get there, and what do you need to do in order to get there? So Neptune, retrograde, 7 degrees, we're getting hip to the water trip because it is going to be a big deal. Just ask the people in Detroit what's going on with their water. They're rebelling up there. They are rebelling. Pluto, retrograde, 12 degrees, Capricorn, coming back to my Saturn for one last time. One last hurrah, hitting my Saturn. And then Chiron, 17, Pisces. A lot of people, a lot of early 1960s people going through their Chiron returns. If you were born in 1963, 64, 62, 63, 64, I guess even 61. 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, you're going through your Chiron return. And you're learning how to be an unabashedly spiritual person without other people thinking you are pathetic or insane. So embrace it and become the devout, emotional being that you were meant to be. All right, so there we go. Those are this week's planets. I'm going to play a little bit of music, and when I come back, I'm going to get into the MC, the midheaven, and I'm going to talk a little bit about LeBron James, and then we're going to get into Israel's chart. We're going to do this really for like the next 45 minutes. So go to the bathroom, get a cup of coffee, grab a smoke, do whatever you do, and hang in there. I'm going to play a newer piece of music that I just downloaded, which I'll probably get dinged for, but it's a really good piece of music. I just need to find it now. Where is it?
It is, hold on, I'm going to find it. You're going to like this. It's going to be worth the wait, trust me. Oh, by the way, a big shout out and prayers to our friend Visible, who moved and has gone through a really difficult time. Really difficult. I believe it was in an accident. He's on the mend and recovering, but we're thinking about you, Viz, and you take care of yourself. Get you back on here as soon as you can be physically able to join us. And I'm just talking because I'm still trying to find this song. I'm going to find it. I know I'm going to find it. It's coming. It is coming. We're almost there. We're almost there. We're almost there. All right, hold on. There's got to be a way to do this better, because I'm wasting your time and I'm wasting mine. I'm starting to get. Hold on. Let's do this. Here it is. Bibi Na Mapul is the name of the track. The singer is Mim Suleiman. You're going to like this. Bibi Na Mapul. Mim Suleiman. I'll be back in 5 minutes, 57 seconds. You are listening to the 11th House.
Uchukue jamani chakula hicho, fanyeni watu wale. Fanyeni jamani chakula hicho ili watu wale.
With that abrupt ending, that was Bibi Namapu from Mim Suleiman. She is from Zanzibar, lives in Sheffield, England, and her bio claims that she is a small woman with a big voice. She teaches workshops, and she performs this really interesting kind of dancey global fusion. I thought I'd play that because it's a happy song. It's an upbeat song. Okay, so you're listening to the 11th House. I'm Robert Phoenix, and the time is 12:53 here in Austin, Texas. And we're going to get into the midheaven, the MC midheaven. That'd be kind of a cool name for a guy in a hip-hop group, don't you think? MC midheaven? I kind of like that. Maybe that'll be my my hip-hop name, MC midheaven. Anyway, the midheaven, as we have already covered the ground of the ascendant and the descendant, I guess the polar opposite, meaning on the polar extremes of the chart would be the IC and the midheaven. And what's interesting is everything is flipped with the chart, because the ascendant is looks like it's on the western side of the chart, but it's really on the east, and the descendant's on the west. And the IC is on the northern, and the MC is on the southern, but they're all flipped around. So, in any case, the MC is at the point of the chart that is roughly 12 noon, the midheaven or the mid part of the day. Generally speaking, right around that time, the signs that are associated with the midheaven would be Scorpio or Capricorn or Sagittarius, roughly. It doesn't always have to be, obviously, because there are different ascendants, but that's usually what we kind of look at with that time, roughly from about 10 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, the midheaven is the gateway or the portal to what we do with our lives, what we bring to the table, our vocations, our gifts, our skills, our mission and purpose in many ways. And if a person has planets in the midheaven, or planets in the 10th house, then they have kind of a social responsibility to some extent, because the 10th house represents the world, to tap into and manifest those planets and bring them into the world at large. Now, the midheaven, which is the gateway or the door to the 10th house, that will indicate the energy that we are supposed to tap into and use for this type of experience, right? So let's do an example. Let's say Gemini is on the midheaven. So that would mean the 9th house would then be Taurus, right? Be a Taurus 9th house. So then we would go all the way back around. We would go Taurus on the 9th, and then we would have Aries on the 8th, and then Pisces on the 7th. So now we have a 7th house Pisces descendant. We have Virgo on the ascendant and Gemini on the midheaven. So Gemini midheaven would be double Mercury in some ways, because of dealing with Virgo, which theoretically is ruled by Mercury on the ascendant, and then we'd have another expression of Mercury, Gemini, on the midheaven. So regardless of what any planets are in the 10th house, the individual with Gemini on the midheaven needs to communicate. They need to communicate. They need to share information. They need to be able to somehow leave their mark on the world and say that I was here, and I was here because I was able to tell you something about why I was here, or what it was important to be here, what was important about being here. Gemini on the midheaven is almost like having Mercury, the planet Mercury on the midheaven, because they're ruled by the same team. So Gemini on the midheaven
will also, in some ways, have to engage the other because Gemini represents duality. It's not always great. Gemini isn't always great in partnership. That's not one of Gemini's necessarily strong suits, although they're not terrible at it either. But what they will do is they will engage the other to use the other as a platform so that they can have their own voice. So an interesting Gemini midheaven would be somebody that is an ombudsman or a columnist or writes, and they have a adversary that they would go up against, and therefore their voice could be reflected, and therefore their voice could have a voice. So let's say Sean Hannity, and I don't know if he has a Gemini midheaven or not. Maybe somebody could find out. Sean Hannity would be somebody that would have, or let's say Sean Hannity had a Gemini midheaven. He would rail against the liberal progressive class, and by doing so, he would have a voice. And that's how Gemini on the midheaven kind of works. It's one example of Gemini on the midheaven. But whatever sign is on the midheaven, that individual needs to encounter that material in a profound kind of way. Because if you want to make your way in this world, you need to be able to have a strong and healthy midheaven or a relationship to it, to understand it. And most people don't. Most people wind up completely not understanding their midheaven, therefore completely not understanding their purpose. And when you don't understand your purpose or what you're good at or why you're here, then you flounder. And when you flounder, life gets difficult. So the midheaven is the key to being able to work and live and manifest your gifts and skills and talents and hopefully get rewarded for them. Because what's right below the midheaven? Well, it's the fourth house. It's where you live. The midheaven is the roof of the fourth house. It puts the roof over you by being able to interact and engage with the midheaven. Now, for some people, I would say all people, one of the most important transits is when Saturn crosses the midheaven. Because when Saturn crosses the midheaven, then we have, what does Saturn do? Saturn always resets the planet that it crosses. But when it crosses the midheaven, there is a major reset, significant, and we see the completion of a cycle that started when Saturn went into the fourth house. Because at that point, the IC, Saturn is redefining roots, redefining the entire structure in order of the individual. And then when Saturn begins to climb out of the fourth house and makes its ascent, we're going to call it an ascent, towards the midheaven, it is accruing energy, momentum, information, experience, knowledge, understanding, whatever those things are. And it picks it all of that stuff, like a cosmic vacuum, moving through the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th houses, and culminating with its passing across the midheaven, because that would represent the culmination of what is roughly about a 12-year cycle or 15-year cycle, because we're talking about 360 degrees. So it's roughly about a 12 to 15-year cycle with Saturn going through all those houses. And then you have a peak with Saturn on the midheaven. And when Saturn goes into the 10th house, that is when you as an individual can benefit from the discipline, the focus, and the energy that Saturn would bring you. And it would be an energy that would be, in some ways, socially rewarding. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean that you would be
rewarded by going out and going to a lot of parties or potlucks, or that's not really what I'm talking about. It would be more along the lines of society or culture at large recognizing you as an individual for all the hard work that you put into it. You put into that 12 to 15 year transit, right? That's what it represents. And it may not be society, it could be your job, it could, your workplace, whatever that thing is, but it is a culmination, it is a peak, and it's a powerful, powerful time. So if your midheaven is in the sign of Scorpio, you're going to have Saturn crossing or having crossed or will cross your midheaven and will be in your 10th house or will have been in your 10th house. So that means that you would be really focusing, being very disciplined on something that would be transformational in nature, because that's what Scorpio does. So again, I'll use myself as the guinea pig. When I had Saturn going through my 10th house, that's when my blog and all the other stuff took off. I've got Saturn going through my 12th house now. Trust me, it's a very different trip. It's a very different realm. So the Saturn transit of the midheaven is important. And once it moves through the 10th house, it begins its decline again. It starts to go down. It's like the sun going down. Jupiter on the midheaven, or Jupiter transit the midheaven is not bad, but it is transient. It does not spend as much time there. Saturn moves slower, Jupiter faster. It can cross the midheaven in about a week to 10 days. And then it's in the second 10th house for who knows how long. 4 months, 5 months, a year and 4 months, a year and 5 months. However, because Jupiter transits are really at the most about a year and a half, right? So that brings us opportunity to our career or vocation, because that's what Jupiter does. It expands. We can take advantage of that. So the whole idea here with the midheaven is to know where your planets are, to understand the essence of the energy that is on the midheaven, that is on the MC, and then begin to look at planets around it, on the other side of it, or planets that are coming through. And I guarantee you, whatever that planet is, whether it's Venus or Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, Uranus, it will have a profound impact on who you are and what you bring to the world. It doesn't even have to cross the midheaven. It can be in some form of aspect, a square to the midheaven, trine to the midheaven, sextile to the midheaven, opposition to the midheaven. All of those angles will also affect the midheaven. And you know how that game works. Squares are harder, trines are easier, sextiles are activation, oppositions are tricky. I think oppositions might be one of the more difficult aspects to kind of understand and grasp, because you're being pulled apart in two different directions. And we all have our ideas and strategies around the opposition. So the midheaven is important. The midheaven is your signature to who you are and what you bring to the world. And my left ear is killing me right now. Absolutely killing me. All right, so let's get into this. We're going to get into the midheaven in the 10th house, and we're going to get into it with the chart of Israel. This is kind of what's happening in Israel and Gaza, Palestine. It's a big deal. A very, very big deal. And the reason it's a big deal is because we theoretically are living in a time where there should be more awareness. Certainly, there is more social awareness based on social media. And we're always being given examples of this. Right? Somebody says, Anthony of Anthony and Opie. I'm not a huge fan of those guys. I never really listened to them, although their interview with Louis C.K. is classic. I highly recommend it, where he calls Don Rumsfeld a reptilian, a lizard being. That's a great interview. But I don't really, have much in stake in the Anthony and Opie thing. But here's a guy where he said something about an event that happened to him and he lost his job. and he was being harassed and confronted by a woman in New York City, and he videotaped her, and it started to get weird because she thought that he was videotaping her. He wasn't, but then she challenged him, and she got violent with him, and he called her later on a beast. And because she was not of the same ethnic persuasion as Mr. Anthony, he was forced to leave his job at Sirius Radio. He was running out of his contract anyway. They basically gave him the boot. And he said, well, I won't apologize for this. But I'm just trying to give you an idea as to what happens. Everything is about some form of social awareness through social media. Okay. Dwight Howard, by the way. Dwight Howard, who plays for the Houston Rockets, tweeted about how bad things were in Palestine/Gaza. And he's a basketball player, and I've never heard Dwight Howard get political, but he's a Sagittarius, so he has some understanding of outrage in the human condition. And within minutes, he removed that tweet. But in the Twitter realm, you're somebody, people follow you, all it has to do is stay up there for a little bit, and people grab that stuff. So the NBA basically told Dwight very quickly, you got to get that down, young man, because we don't criticize this country. So even though we have more awareness, social awareness through social media, we're not always completely aware as to what's going on in a particular place because there's a lot of spin. In fact, we live in a universe of spin. But anyway, in case you have not been following the news, there has been a massive escalation in terms of rockets, missiles, mortars, and it looks like there's going to be an on-the-ground occupation of Gaza, which is very costly and potentially very expensive. Anytime you occupy a land, it generally doesn't work out so well. So the Israelis are contemplating all this because there was an event where 3 Israeli teens were kidnapped. Now, people on the alternative news side of things have reason to believe that it was a false flag. I got an email from Max Eigen, who's been on the show, and it was heard that the kidnappers were speaking Hebrew. Now, one could say, well, Hamas has learned how to speak Hebrew and has basically put this back on the Israelis and making it look like it was the Israelis. I mean, come on. Neptune is in Pisces, and getting to the bottom of this sometimes can be almost ridiculous. But there tends to be evidence here that corroborates that this was kind of a setup, and a setup so that the Israelis can go out and do what they do and take more land and boot more settlers. And it's not pretty. It's just not a pretty scene to witness. Although, if you are in Sderot, which is the highlands overlooking Palestine and Gaza, getting a nice plastic folding chair or lounge chair with some popcorn and your favorite soft drink and watching all the explosions, it is a form of theater of the grotesque and macabre, but a theater. So some people do enjoy this. This is a problem. This is a major issue, conflagration on a spiritual level, esoteric level. That area generally is considered a portal, a major portal, one of the major portals on the planet. And so when there is grief, when there is anger, when there is violence, when there is hate, all those emotions get swept up into the Hoover of the portal. So when shit is happening there, you can just imagine that there are interdimensional beings that are bathing in the excess of human emotion. I'm just loving it. So one of the reasons why this stuff happens is because these are energies that entities feed on. And I'll tell you right now, there's a big portal there. It's all interdimensional. So
it is, it's a family buffet hour for those entities. So on some level, that's important to understand and recognize, but on another level, just from the human perspective, this is a very powerful and tragic situation. And our eyes are mostly averted from this because of how the media portrays it. Now, Israel here, I have May 14th, 1948, 4:37 p.m. in Tel Aviv. So this was when David Ben-Gurion stood before the masses, gathered in Tel Aviv, and declared Israel's independence. That's it. That's the time. That's the day. That's the date. Based on that, the ascendant for Israel is Scorpio, 0 degrees. The IC is Aquarius, 3 degrees. The descendant is Taurus, 0 degrees. And the midheaven is Leo, 3 degrees. So what we see here with the country, with the Leo midheaven, is that it is proud. Right? Because that's what Leo represents. It represents pride, represents ego, represents love and creativity. And, so with Leo there on the midheaven, we also have the image of royalty, right? So this is the land of King Solomon, Solomon's temple, right? And then we have the King of Kings, Jesus and Emmanuel. So it's all Leo. It's all bubbling up on the midheaven. But it's also a symbol of pride, because that's what Leo represents. Pride, ego, courage, vanity, all these things that we associate with Leo. Now, there's the moon there at 4 degrees. So the moon is 1 degree off of the midheaven. So moon and Leo. So again, the emotions here are proud, bordering on egotistical. It can be very emotional, passionate, loving. But again, this is all fixed energies on all 4 of those cardinal points. But also with the moon, we get into things like cycles and phases, how the moon is full and not full, and how the moon is dark, or there's a shadow, and there's one side of the moon, there's another side of the moon. We don't see the dark side of the moon. So when we see the moon in the midheaven, we look at the moon in its totality. We see the light side of the moon, but what's behind it? What is the dark side? What are we not seeing? And so it's especially important when there is the moon in the midheaven, because it's what happens to the world. If the moon is in a different house, let's say the moon is in the 3rd house, well, that's going to be much more local. It's going to be about communication. And the shadow side, or the dark side of the moon that we don't see, may not necessarily mean as much. It would be much more subjective. But when it is conjunct the midheaven, what we see and what we don't see is very, very important. So that's a definition of the moon and Leo on the midheaven. Here's Uranus, also there, conjunct Saturn. Now, we were talking a bit earlier, it's also conjunct the moon, so by 8 degrees. So Uranus is is it Uranus? No, I take that back. That's Pluto. That's Pluto, my friends. Uranus is in the 8th house. So Pluto is conjunct Saturn, and Pluto is conjunct the moon. And Pluto in the 10th house is very powerful, very willful, especially in the sign of Leo. We are going to get things done. We're going to present ourselves in an unmistakable kind of way, and we don't care what you think. That is Pluto in Leo in the 10th house. And when it is conjunct Saturn, what we have here is we have the energy of antiquity in the ages, right? This whole Saturnian relationship and connection to probably Orthodox religion with Saturn there. But it's also, with Saturn, we talked about Saturn, it looks forward towards the future as well. And if you have seen any pictures of the Knesset, which is where they run the government out of in Israel, it's a complete esoteric wonderland, and all based on symbols around Freemasonry. So here we have Saturn conjunct Pluto in Leo, 10th house,
And Saturn's karma, too. It's a karmic planet. So there's karma to deal with. And Leo also represents children. So what's happening with Israel is Jupiter is about to go onto the midheaven. And then it will conjunct the Israeli moon, the Israeli Pluto, and the Israeli Saturn, all by the end of the year. And so Jupiter expands what it touches, right? So when it hits the moon, it's going to expand the emotionality of that country, for better or worse, right? That's what it'll do. When it hits Pluto, it is definitely going to expand. And Pluto, Jupiter on Pluto in Leo in the 10th house, that's a power trip. That is a big, big power trip. Huge, huge. Their true node is in the sign of Taurus, which is in the 7th house, and they have Sun in the 7th house. So theoretically, this is a country that needs to build relationships, that needs to build long-standing relationships, because that's what Taurus does. But those planets are also in square. The Sun at 23 is in square to Mars, and we're going to get to Mars at 28. So there is an inherent and built-in Sun-Mars square to this chart. Sun-Mars square always represents conflict and anger and a feeling of being argumentative. That's what the Sun-Mars square, and it could be internally, it could be externally, but this is the aspect of the battler. And again, these are fixed signs. So the Sun in Taurus is all about survival, squaring Mars in Leo, which is about pride and about ego and about, I will. That is the phrase for Leo, I will. So when Sun squares Mars, it's like, I will and I don't give a shit. So what's happening? What's happening with this chart? Well, I can tell you right now, there is a Saturn square going on. Boom. Saturn is transiting Israel's first house. What does that mean? It means that the rest of the world can and probably likely will be judgmental with Saturn going through that first house in Scorpio. Now, the best solution for a country going through a Saturn in Scorpio transit would be instead of, because there's one of the things that is endemic to a Saturn transit of the first house is you have to get rid of things. You have to get rid of baggage. You have to get rid of psychic structures and anchors in your life that are holding you down from being streamlined and disciplined. So I guess in some ways this can be translated into what's happening with the Palestinians. Let's just get rid of them. But that's an externalization of an internal process. Because with Saturn in the first house, that country needs to internally understand and then reject and let go of the psychological structures that have been limiting them so that they can experience a sense of rebirth, not projected onto it the rest of the world or part of the world. That's not how it works. So the South Node is in Scorpio in the first house. Not a great place because the South Node in Scorpio is very willful, vulnerable, feels vulnerable. There's all kinds of projection that goes on with South Node in Scorpio in the first house. So Saturn is on the South Node, which would mean that they want to be protective, right, for whatever reason that is. But there's a Saturn square going on. Saturn in Leo in the 10th, squaring Saturn in the 1st. It's happening right now. The Saturn square, and I've talked about this before, I talked about it on the show before, that Saturn square is that dynamic point where there is a form of karmic retribution. There is a form of karmic reckoning in the house of the world and in the house of the self. It's taking place. It's going down. Now, what's going to happen is, and I've talked about this before, But again, it's worth bearing and listening to and remembering that Saturn will be squaring the Israeli Mars in November of this year. And that Saturn-Mars square will also be happening roughly in relation to a Saturn-Sun opposition. So we're talking a T-square when Saturn hits 23 degrees. It will be exactly opposite the Sun, and it will be in square with Mars. And that will be a significant time because what happens with the Saturn-Sun opposition is that countries that have had a relationship, 7th house, with this country, they will then look at the relationship and they will review it and figure out whether or not they are opposed to the current relationship as it exists. And this is going to get real tricky because of the Saturn-Mars square, which is angry, frustrated, fiery, willful, again, all 10th house. Now, Venus is right on the Israeli Uranus currently. So it's conjunct Uranus, which means that it's opposite Jupiter because the Israeli Jupiter is at 27 degrees Sagittarius, which makes it conjunct the galactic center. That's pretty profound. And Jupiter in the second house means lots of money and resources. A well-placed Jupiter. However, Uranus is opposed to that Jupiter. And so there is, well, it's interesting because it's in Gemini, and we're talking about other people's money, right? So this is the axis, I believe, of the United States chart, which is Sag rising and the Gemini descendant, taking place on the 2nd and the 8th houses within Israel, which is other people's money, and Uranus in the 8th house. Bringing all that wealth down into the 2nd house. Mercury is at, what did we say, 1 degree Cancer? Well, by Thursday, Mercury will be on the natal Venus of Israel, which is at 4 degrees Cancer. That's going to be very interesting because that's in the 9th house, and the 9th house is other countries. So there's going to be a lot of dialogue and a lot of discussion around who this country is and what they are doing. So the debate is going to get kicked up a notch. And as we've seen with all these very proud planets, Leo in the 10th, it won't necessarily go down well. Remember, fixed energy on every single cardinal point in the chart. And Venus, it certainly, well, it does. Venus squares Neptune in this chart. Yeah. And that Neptune is in the 12th house. So keep your eye on Israel because there's going to be a lot coming out from heat over the course of the next few weeks and peaking in a lot of ways with the Saturn-Mars square in November and potentially quite dangerous because the opposition between the Sun and Saturn and the square to Mars. So let's all hope that the real spirit of peace, true peace, not some politically crafted piece of peace comes into play here. That the true love and devotion and the spirit of peace, which can be available to the hearts of men and women, plays a role, and that people can understand why they're doing what they're doing in real time. A moment where they kind of meet their maker before they meet their maker. A collective moment of conscience. This is what is needed. If that happens, then things can change. And that Leo energy can be loving, benevolent, proud, but giving at the same time. But in order to do so, it will need to have a major, major transformation. All right, it is 1:30 here in Central Texas. You're listening to 11th House Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix. And there's hardly anybody in the chat room today, man. There's more people now. Oh, I'm getting some help in my left ear. The chat room's picked up a little bit. Took an hour to get into the chat. Man, that is a bummer. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. Hey, Gate 7, what's happening? All right, let me play a little more music. Did you guys like that last track I played? Let me play a little more music, and then we're going to get into some free readings. How's that sound? Free readings. How about, let me play, what do I want to play now? So a man called Clay came up and in some conversation, discussion the other day, through a friend of a friend, or through a friend. He's now become a friend of a friend. He used to be a friend. He still is a friend. He just doesn't know he's a friend. So here's Umek, man called Clay. I'll be back in 4 minutes and 52 seconds. You're listening to 11th House. If you want a free reading, 347-308-8995. 347-308-8995. I'm Robert Phoenix.
Wasn't that a nice, light, lovely little interlude here in the Texan afternoon? I'm Robert Phoenix. You're listening to the 11th House, and that was Man Called Clay, Lumek. That's the name of that track. Delightful. All right, this is the time where you get to call in. You get to chime in, and I get to look at your chart. There's one already. 347-308-8995 is the number, and let's waste no more time. Hello there.
Hello. Hi, Robert. It's Linda calling from Canada.
What's happening there?
Me?
Linda? How are you?
I'm good. Oh, I can hear myself. I'm going to go outside.
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yeah, that's fine. You sound a little out of breath.
I am. It's emotional, not physical.
Okay.
Just my work, my campground, all the stress of it. And you've been talking about the midheaven, and last week the descendant, and I had a realization about my relationship with the public, because my descendant is 0 Aries and my midheaven is 0 Cancer. So recently, yeah, I know. And so I suddenly realized, oh yeah, that's my main relationship in life, the public. And what a time I'm having with them.
Well, yeah, so your midheaven is Cancer, and you're engaged in campgrounds and families, and all those things that theoretically would go along with that, right? Nurturing the family, nurturing in nature, and so that's actually a pretty good placement for you in terms of the work that you do. And then, Aries down in the 4th house would be certainly interesting as it relates to, your own home.
Aries is the 7th house.
Oh, 7th. You're right. So
that's my descendant.
So Capricorn would be in your
4th house.
4th house.
Good old Pluto sitting in the 4th house.
Yeah, so you would have to be the CEO of your home, right? I mean, that's what what it's about. So, running your home like it's a business, and home is your business, right?
It's interesting because it is my home and it's a campground and there's people all around me. It's really hard not to take it personally when they are disrespectful or damage things or that kind of thing,
Certainly, Pluto is an interesting energy to work with because it's all about power, right? I mean, ultimately, that's what Pluto represents. It represents power. And it shows us where we may not have as much as we think we do. It also shows us where we need to expand and explore or dig in or get more focus so that we can tap into it more. But it's always calling us to kind of connect with and re-establish our relationship with power. And the false power, theoretically, with Pluto would fall away, right? And then what happens, because Pluto is so alchemical and transformational, that the power left over would be the responsible power, or the legitimate power, or the power that's used to create, not destroy. That's generally how Pluto works. So for you, with that Pluto down there transiting your 4th house, it's how much power do you have? How much power do you wield? How do people experience it when you wield it? Do they have kind of a response that is like over the top, like, well, I didn't really mean it that way, but all of a sudden you're coming across like Attila the Hun, and so then you draw back and you say, well, I just need to get this done, and if I do it like this, then people may not necessarily listen to me or respect me. So that's a big Pluto piece. And I think
as Mars has been transiting Libra, squaring that Pluto, which is my Mars.
Right.
Mars at 12 degrees of Capricorn, and I have Uranus in Cancer, right? So this grand square has been, the grand square has been really affecting me. But as Mars went through my 1st house, lighting all that up, I was so angry. I wanted to strangle every camper. and it was really hard not to be rude.
I know. I know it's difficult. It's a challenge because you're the whole Mars aspect and peace is a whole other thing, right? And you're trying to live in balance with Mars.
Yeah.
Or balance with the environment or with other people.
Right.
So it's like, okay, strike a balance here. You want to have fun. You want to relax. You want to, kick off your shoes and get away from the world. But on the other hand, let's not trash the environment. Let's, try to have a modicum of respect for other people while we're doing it. That can be a hard balance to strike in some ways. So.
Right, but it's interesting that when Mars got later on, now that it's at, I think it's 24 Libra, it's sort of out of range, and I have found a more peaceful way to present myself. I'm not so edgy. I'm not so, jumping down their throat. I mean, it was really hard because, people ask dumb questions, and they have this sense of that they, deserve everything right now. And I'm already trying as hard as I can, so when they want even more, it's really hard not to react. Yeah. But anyways, it's been interesting to see Mars's transit through my first house. And so now Mercury is on my midheaven. And what's been happening in the last week, there's 116 campsites, so there's 500 people here. And this is why I sound breathless, because I'm the mom of 500 people. But we've been hit 3 times in the last week with robbers stealing from the campers. Oh, no. And it's just my heart just sinks, with these parents telling me, they took all our favorite snacks, it's just so sad. And I feel powerless again. There I was thinking everything was going well, and it just out goes.
Well,
so Mercury
is also, it's a planet that in both signs, Gemini and Virgo, is mutable, right? Mm-hmm. So when you have Mercury on your midheaven, you've got to be changeable. You have to be adaptable. And so when, it's like that song by David Sylvian when he was with Japan called Ghosts. And his line was, just when I think I'm winning, when I broke through every door, the ghosts in my life were wilder than before, right? Well, there's a sense that you can just hang out with that, but Mercury says that you need to be mutable, you need to be changeable, you need to find a more inventive sort of solution in some ways.
Right. Yeah.
So one of the things that I would certainly, because transiting Mercury is in the sign of Cancer, right? So one of the things that I would look at would be, what do the robbers want? What are they looking for? They're looking for food,
Alcohol, number 1.
Okay.
Food, number 2.
Okay, so I know this sounds completely enabling, but maybe you could have a free night once a month where food, snacks, goodies, cases of beer, 6-packs of beer, whatever, are given away, right? And you have a budget, like a $50 budget for the free night, so that these people that want to come in and steal things, instead of stealing things, they actually get to have a night where something's being given to them.
Well, this is local teenagers, and so, can't give them alcohol.
All right, so take alcohol out of the equation.
Yeah, I could give them pizza.
Pizza, something free nights.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting story I read. It was the guy, Phil Robertson, who is the head of the Duck Dynasty clan. Mm-hmm. And he, for a long time, he ran a nightclub and a bar, Roadhouse, down in Louisiana. And he got into a lot of trouble. And he wound up having to leave that job because that life, because it was ruining his marriage and his kids. So he had to go find something new. Mm-hmm. So he started to fish so that he could sell the fish. And there were these guys that kept coming by and stealing his fish. And he was getting really upset with them. And then one day he caught them, and he just picked the fish up and he gave them the fish. And they took the fish, and they never came back again.
Oh, my God.
So I think the thing with Mercury, right, Cancer, because you want to feed, you want to nurture, you want to care, Mercury being adaptable and mutable, we're going to have a free night. And you send out the word to whoever is there.
Well, here's the other day I put a notice on the local radio station offering a $100 reward. So that would be my next announcement is those people who feel like they need to steal from our campers because they're hungry, we got a free pizza night. Come by on whatever day, Thursday or something.
That's right.
That's a great idea. I love it.
Yeah, there you go. So that's Mercury being adaptable and mutable up in the midheaven. And
right.
And you never know what can come out of those kinds of connections.
Exactly.
Right? You might all of a sudden find a young person whose life is going sideways, and all of a sudden, just through a few slices of pizza and a Pepsi, you've reached them, and they're like, "Hey, what else do you do here? Maybe I can help or something." So.
Right. Because local teenagers, we want to be friends, not enemies.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's wonderful. Food for thought. Ha ha ha.
I like that.
Thanks a lot, Robert.
Hey, you're welcome. It's great hearing your voice.
Yours too. I'm happy that I have tune in today and hear what's going on. But of course, I always listen to your show offline.
Yeah.
When I'm lying on the beach, I listen to last week's show.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you called in, and take good care of yourself, Linda. All right?
You too. Bye for now.
All right. I think I've got time for one more reading. We've got time for one more. 347-308-8995. 347-308-8995. And you are listening to 11th House Radio. Right here. Is my left ear feeling any better? Yes, it is. Slightly, it is. I went swimming in Barton Springs 2 days ago, and I had water get into my ear and got underneath. So it's stuck. Water is stuck in my ear. So that's the challenge right now. It hurts. It's painful. But yeah, it feels better. Thank you. Thank you, TN. I appreciate that. Let me go back to the studio. 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. That's the number if you want to have your chart looked at right here on the air. I don't have my tarot cards handy, although I could pull them out. I could find them if I needed to. If somebody wanted to do a tarot reading, we could play with that as well. Whatever you want to do. This is your time. Your time. Free time, boys and girls. Remember free time in elementary school? Remember what that was like? And we're going to have free time today. And I was like, wow, free time. What a radical thought. In school, free time. Do whatever you want. So it's free time here. That's what we're offering, free time. What a concept, free time. For those of you who are interested, if you are interested at all, my son got his stitches out. He's back in the baseball field. He's doing fine, He is a true warrior. And it's funny, too, because he is this blonde and freckle-faced kid. And you look at him and you go, oh, he's just, he's a kid. But let me tell you, man, he's a tough kid. He's a tough kid. I don't know too many kids can get smashed in the face with a baseball, have their bottom teeth embedded just below their lip, right? And then have to pull the lip up and pull it away from the teeth. Profuse blood, 5 stitches, 2 days later they're playing again. And they're playing the same position where they got smashed in the face and making a game-winning play. Yes, he is my kid. So I am proud of him. One more time, 347-308-8995. That's the number if you want to call in, get yourself a free astrological reading right here on the 11th House with me, your host, Robert Phoenix. I will look at your chart, I will look at your stars, and I will portend your destiny to the best of my ability. And you have my guarantee on that, a heartfelt guarantee. I'm becoming more and more of a Texan with every single passing day. You know why? Because I had somebody from California cruise through here, and they were a pain in the ass. Sorry. And you realize, right, living in California is a burden. It is a freaking spiritual and political burden. And Californians need to deburden themselves of their quasi-elite mentality about what it is to be a human being. Leave California, go to a different part of the country, hopefully someplace that is not very much like where you just left, so that you can experience a different kind of world and a different kind of America. I highly recommend it. It's very liberating. Very liberating. 347-308-8995. That's the number. And the clock is ticking, which means I won't have time to do another reading if you don't call in soon. But don't feel like you have to call in just because I'm not, oh, somebody called in. But you didn't have to do that. Let's get it anyway. Hello there.
Hello, Robert. This is Tessa.
Oh, hey, what's happening, T?
I keep getting hurt. I fall down or trip, and I always get this feeling right before it happens that I'm going to fall, but I can't prevent it.
That
There's
sounds like
something in my chart that might relate to that.
That sounds like something out of a Philip K. Dick novel.
Yeah, it does.
I think that's Phil.
What? Tripping me?
Yeah, or trying to get your attention with something. That's what it feels like.
I don't know. What bugs me is that I always know it's going to happen, and no matter what I do, it doesn't. I can't prevent it.
The precognitive thing is definitely Mr. Philip K. Dick. Knowing, right? The precognitive moment of knowing the experience. Let me see if I have your chart here still. I think I do.
Well, I think there's something about this weird weather in California.
Yeah, well, that is all like heart-based weird weather, right? So you're dealing with the intensity of all those heart fields and all that stuff.
Oh, and the smart meter.
Oh, the smart meter stuff. That's yeah. We have it here in Texas, by the way. A lot of them.
Yeah, they would remove it for $200, and I'd have to pay extra every month to have someone come read the meter.
I did that. I did it. You know why? Because my smart meter was right adjacent to my living room. So it was worth it for me. When's your birthday again?
June 20.
And what year?
1954.
All right, I'm just going to look at the ephemeris. June 20, 1954. Let's see.
Yeah, I just turned 60 and I'm still alive.
Well, congratulations. That's not an easy feat in today's world.
Well, I feel like I'm 20 until I try to do something.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Let's see. So Venus, Mercury in Cancer. Trying to see what you have. Well, you have Mars retrograde in Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, when we talk about or look at the occurrence of, maybe having a deja vu or precognitive moments, I would tend to look at retrograde planets. And you also have
Saturn retrograde, and that's in Virgo. And Saturn rules the entire skeletal structure.
And Mom is a Virgo, by the way.
I take that back. I'm sorry. I got this mixed up. You have Saturn in Scorpio, not Virgo. I got the tail end of the M confused.
Oh. So it's in my rising sign.
Right. So that would be your persona. But again, it's moving backwards, and Saturn does represent the skeletal structure, and Mars is in mutual reception because it's sextile, and so you have a Mars-Saturn sextile in your chart, which is considered to be good. And Mars in Capricorn is considered to be quite good, actually. But you also have Uranus in Libra retrograde, so you have a lot of retrograde activity in your chart. And
well, then I guess I was right to take a break from my radio show. I'm doing it today and then taking a long vacation.
That could be good. You have Chiron in Capricorn retrograde as well. So a lot of retrograde motion. And again, Capricorn represents the entire skeletal system and physical body. Yeah. You have.
I don't see any more broken bones.
Well, I would say maybe wearing a football uniform around with shoulder pads and hip pads. That might help. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do have a cane, crutches, and a walker from previous incidents.
Wow.
Oh, and braces.
Wow. That's quite a bit. That is quite a bit. Bubble wrap. Bubble wrap could be your friend. Just bubble wrap yourself.
Well, I went the first 56 years of my life with no broken bones, and then all of a sudden, ribs, one leg. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I would have to look at your progress chart. Maybe next time I get on the air, we can do that. We could look at your progress chart, okay?
Okay. Meanwhile, I'll get out the bubble wrap.
Bubble wrap up, and just in case you fall into a pool or something, you'll be able to float, too.
Oh, good. I hate swimming.
Yeah. All right,
I can
Tessa.
do it, just don't like it.
Well, bubble wrap would be your friend then.
Okay.
All right. Take care of yourself, all right?
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That is Tessa K. Dick, the widow of the late Philip K. Dick, whose voice you will hear in around 2 minutes and 40 seconds as we say goodbye. In fact, you'll probably have it sooner than that. All right, that's it. We've reached the end of my show, the 11th House. All right, the 11th House. It's over. If you were here, you caught it. And if you weren't here, you can still catch it. And you can catch it right here on Blog Talk Radio or YouTube, where we keep the archives, thanks to Erica Mermuse, who does such a fine job keeping them up there. Thank you so much for doing that. Until Friday, with my guest to be determined at this point in time, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open as possible. Check me out at robertphoenix.com. And I am still running my Astro Coach special. That's 5 readings and or astrology lessons for the price of $250. And I normally do 1 hour reading for $125. So you're getting a pretty darn good deal over at robertphoenix.com. All right, that's it. I'll see everybody on Friday. Take good care. Until then, here's Philip K. Dick.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu. perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words, I submit that these impressions are valid and significant. And I will even say this, such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.